Mike Gundy had a press conference again and slipped up to say something crazy once again. Will this be taken out of context, or is it possibly concerningly accurate?
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayOState today. We're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 back in bonus bets. If your $5 hauler is a winner, make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Meanwhile, we get started in the conversation of Mike Gundy's most recent interview. Now, today, that's not what we were going to discuss. Initially, I was going to have a conversation about the depth chart and how I felt like the depth chart was just a little bit of a middle finger to everybody. But at the same time, I also started to realize it has a lot to do with it being senior day. And you do have to give an ode to all of the individuals who are willing to bust their tails and go through the classes and the courses and the body by glass and football for years. So definitely want to take the acknowledgement moment for all of these seniors. So perhaps the depth chart isn't a massive middle finger, but more or less just an indication that the seniors are going to play quite a bit. And when you go back to even the 90s, that was pretty normal, right? Even before Mike Gundy, I remember seeing some of the backup quarterbacks that would start the game, even though they hadn't played a single snap all year because they were seniors. I did think it was pretty cool, so I kind of get it. I don't necessarily view it as a middle finger right now because of it being senior day. So it might have been out of context to assume that it was a middle finger. What also could potentially be taken out of context is Mike Gundy talking about it being a light practice. Now, we're not playing for a bowl game. We're not playing for extra practices. So I do kind of get it. But at the same time, having light practices and admitting that we didn't really practice much of last week, and Robert Allen going into a little bit of elaboration with primarily having shell walkthrough style practices. It was a cerebral mental style of week, and that is okay. But I do find it slightly concerning that we're at this point in the season and we're not, I don't necessarily think we need to be out there banging heads per se, but to me, going to a light practice with no pads or a couple days of very light padding, to me, it does kind of send the wrong message. But Ollie Gordon might not be sending the wrong message because apparently he's not on the official walkout senior list. So all of the guys that are going to get the roses and walk out with their family, as of this morning, Ollie Gordon's not on that list, or at least Mike Gundy wasn't aware, which that would be pretty cool if we could potentially get Ollie back for another year, although I don't know if that's likely or not. He talked about the young guys. They're still not going to get extra playing time. I think that's kind of a ridiculous statement. That also sets the wrong example because the freshmen that have been able to come in and play this season have done considerably better than expected and more often than not as good as, if not better than the original starters that were in the game. Milo Smith having improvement over the last month is fairly visible on the field, right? He had more yards than Alan Bowman in his very first series than Alan Bowman did the entire first half. So the more these young guys like Lando Cleveland and David Kabongo and Jonathan Agumidu, they get out there and they get these opportunities, you're seeing that we have some guys from the youth department that are more ready than we're publicly presenting. He mentioned that we didn't need to change anything at practice. He just needed the O-lineman to be more physical, and that's what we got out of the last game, was a more physical version of the offensive line. He admitted that nothing needed to be changed. They didn't need to adjust anything, which I do find either out of context or concerningly accurate. He was also asked in this interview if he was to reverse time, what's the one thing on the season that he would change? And he said just staying healthy. I personally believe that is the weakest answer possible. And frankly, it's slightly unacceptable in my opinion, because you can't have that same excuse, because that's the same thing he talked about in 2022. It's the same thing he talked about in 2020. It's always an injury bug that pops up. And having two guys go down on defense, yes, it's going to wreck your system. But to have it completely fall apart because of two guys, to me, that sets us up for a lot of failure no matter what. It's more along the lines of complacency than potentially being out of context. He talked about the O-line, D-line. He was asked if we needed to hit that position group more so than any other, and he kind of danced around it. So I will help with everybody when I say the answer is yes, Mike Gundy. The NIL dollar bills that we're able to raise for the O-line or Colin Oliver or Nick Martin or Ollie Gordon, all of that money needs to be now reallocated in some fashion, some way, some form, some fashion to just getting O-line and D-line. We have to bolster those two units or we're going to be in another very precarious situation moving on. Perhaps it's going to be a lot of the Justin Kirklands and Colin Clays of the world that are looking to kind of reestablish themselves. And that's fine. We are going to have to dip into the transfer portal to kind of get there. So, yeah, Mike Gundy, don't beat around the bush on that one. You know, I know, everybody in the world knows that our O-line and D-line are the biggest issues on this current roster, other than the quarterback decisions. But, yeah, hammer all that you can on getting O-line and D-linemen. That is a way to instantaneously change the trajectory of next season. He did discuss how the not having any more letters of intent is going to be kind of difficult to manage come December, on top of the announcement of people transferring. It doesn't mean anything if we cannot find a way to regalvanize the locker room and rebuild this particular roster, whether it be through some of the younger guys or the transfer portal. I will admit, at least it was nice of him to say, although it doesn't really mean anything anymore when somebody commits or somebody's designed to go to a particular school, because commitment, that word has changed a lot. At least he didn't call anybody weak. He was also asked about the KU kicking game by RA and if he was able to see the game, and he mentioned that he didn't even see the kickoff. And this is where we hit the nail on the head right here. Direct quote from Mike Gundy: as I told the rest before the BYU game, if I fall asleep in the second quarter, someone wake me up and act like I care. He did go on to then say that essentially he's getting old and it's going to be really late and he's got an early bedtime style of situation. Now, is that comment something that is going to be taken out of context or concerningly accurate? I think that we all know that a decent number of the Gundy supporters are going to make the argument that that comment is completely out of context, which it could be to some degree, but I lean on the side of it might be concerningly accurate. It's just like the comment about the fans not being able to, or individuals not being able to pay their bills and afford their families. Of course, right? It was presented as he didn't mean it to Oklahoma State fans, but I feel like we all kind of got the hint, right? That was him slipping up and saying what he actually felt. I feel like this is another one of those scenarios. Should he have said, wake me up and act like I care? No, he shouldn't have said it. But at the same time, it almost feels like the old man who's starting to just say it like it is and has a lot of these slip-ups. Guys, love him, hate him. Whether you hate what he's done and love what he's been throughout his time at Oklahoma State, I don't view these as mental lapses. I honestly just do not. I view some of these comments as his genuine feelings. We respect and appreciate the honesty, but at the same time, there's been a whole lot of gaslighting, so it's really hard to differentiate between the two. And if it is lapses in judgment by Mike Gundy's part, then maybe he needs to take a moment to be more introspective about his particular legacy at Oklahoma State. Guys, I feel like this ends in three scenarios, right? Either he comes back reinvigorated next season with like 65% new staff, completely overhaul what needs to be done, and has the midseason 2023 style rejuvenation, right? And then we go right back to where we belong, towards the top of the Big 12 and competing for Big 12 titles and CFP appearances. That is the storybook season ending style of stuff that I'm sure we're all hoping for, right? Or you have scenario two. He returns next season as the head coach, slightly salty and with the same attitude of slightly egotistical and kind of just being the smartest guy around, style level complacency, call it what you want to call it. And if that's the case, then we potentially suffer the same fate as this season. Maybe not this bad, but still a losing season where we don't make a bowl game. Then you have to ask yourself, how far backwards are we now? In the new age era of completely changing conferences, this thing is likely not done. So you cannot, in my opinion, go so far backwards that you cannot catch back up. If you're no longer a sexy appeal to an SEC or a Big Ten, then you're shooting yourself in the foot and potentially putting yourself in an AAC style of conversation. And then I think you have the third scenario, which is Mike Gundy decides that his internal animosity, whether it be with the fan base or the donors or whomever the case is, combined with this constantly evolving and changing, growing, shifting landscape of college football, causes him to reevaluate his future holding the clipboard, roaming Boone Pickens Stadium. And then he did mention no bedlam, right? Not being a problem. I find that slightly problematic. His comments about bedlam this whole time have been kind of troublesome for me. I don't like the way he's gone about it. Is he right? Are they the ones that quit and left like a thief in the night? Absolutely. So do we owe them anything? No, we don't. But I feel like it was not the greatest look when he was saying, I have no desire to play them. I don't want to play them anymore, blah, blah, blah. I didn't love it, right? But I love what Mike Gundy's done for Oklahoma State. I love that he is the GOAT. He'll always be the GOAT unless somebody does something crazy. But at the same time, I would always ask that he continuously do what's best for Oklahoma State, even if that has some of that introspective moments mixed in with it. And lastly, he talked about Iman Oates on the plane watching Pokemon. I think that's pretty cool. But at the same time, when you're 0-7 and dead last place in conference play and literally the worst defense in America, I would almost prefer our guys be watching film on the way to the game instead of Pokemon. But nonetheless, I am very high on Iman Oates. I always have been. Same with Justin Kirkland. Hopefully, another year in the system, it makes them take the next big leap in development. And then lastly, the morale of the coaches, he said, is all fine. They're like robots each week, perhaps also taken out of context. Goodness me, I can't speak, but could be a legitimate statement, which to me would be concerning. He also said, I haven't seen anything out of the coaches that's eating them. They're professionals, and they've all been fine. That's concerning. Maybe out of context, but very concerning. He also said right before he got off the podium that in his opinion, players respond to what they see the coaches doing. Is that taken out of context or concerningly accurate? I would vote closer to the side of concerningly accurate because that is a fairly decent depiction of how the team is operated. Like it's not a big deal. And if the coaches are all walking around like everything's fine, it's not a big deal. And that's a reflection of their leadership. Then of course it's going to trickle down to the players and they're going to get to a point that they don't really care anymore either. And that's perhaps where we find ourselves now. And we need to be energized, rejuvenated, reinvigorated for another season. And you can stay rejuvenated today too. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. 5-hour energy is what you're going to need more often than not to stay awake through the game, the season, especially if you're in a precarious spot like we are. All of our friends at 5-hour energy know that you being passionate about football isn't just a hobby. It goes way deeper than that. It's essentially a part of your life. And it takes a lot of energy and power to go through the tailgates, the driving, the touchdown celebrations, and of course, the agonizing defeats and crazy overtimes, which is why they've created the Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. This energy shot is made for super fans like all of us, the fans who are the first in the parking lot, the last to leave, and the wildest of all times. We see you, we get you, we feel you. If you watched Oklahoma State this previous weekend, you did see some of the freshmen out there doing the thing, and it's nice to see some of the younger guys. It was good to see Puasa Utu get out there, Landon Cleveland, David Kabongo. An exciting moment throughout the course of that game was some of the hustle that we saw defensively. But we did need some energy to get by. With 5-hour energy, they know that no matter what team you're rooting for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing out your jersey for the big game to be ready for game day, that's why we have this limited edition Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shot to help you keep fueled throughout the season. What is the most valuable thing for you? It's to stay awake through the game, which you can do with 5-hour energy. Make sure that you go to 5hourenergy.com. Go there today, shipped nationwide. Again, that is 5hourenergy.com to get everything you need to stay engaged through every game. So now we shift gears a little bit here to the old guard, the Hateful Eight, not representing the Big 12 very well. And so I have to eat a piece of humble pie. and say to all of the incoming Pac-12 teams that I didn't think were going to be physically prepared for the depth and the entirety of the season in the Big 12, well, perhaps we were wrong. I was wrong, because when you look at the top of the Big 12, it's a lot of the new dudes. I mean, even Cincinnati is making a valiant effort in their ball games. It's not like they're a team that is going to get ran over whenever they, show up. So the new teams, I apologize to the original Hateful Eight. Iowa State, come on, what are we doing? Like, I think all of us collectively are rooting for BYU. KU is my secondary adopted team, and I must admit I'm very disappointed in the Kansas Jayhawks at the moment, because we need representation in the Big 12. We need somebody from the Big 12 to kind of go crash the CFP party and make some noise. And if we had an undefeated BYU face off in the Big 12 title game against, let's say, a 10-2 Colorado team, the marketing, the eyeballs, that would make it somewhat enticing to get both Big 12 teams in. But now that BYU has a loss, I don't know that that's going to be the same calling. So now we're potentially down to one. And realistically, I've said in the beginning, I don't care who it is from the Big 12. It could be Cincinnati, Arizona State, Louisiana Lafayette. If they were in the conference, I don't care whomever it is. We just need somebody to crash the party and make a good representation of the Big 12. It looked like coming into the season, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State, potentially Texas Tech. Obviously, Arizona and Utah were going to have something to say on the matter, but BYU was not factored. And it, goes to show that Kalani Sitake knew what he was doing, because like myself and many others, BYU got a hard time in the offseason for not being aggressive whatsoever in the transfer portal. They lost a few dudes. They didn't really seem overly aggressive in grabbing extra dudes. They more or less rolled with the same roster as the previous season, which means Kalani Sitake saw something that none of us saw. And that was all of the pieces were already in the building. They just needed another year of maturation process to kind of let it all soak in. And Kalani Sitake was right. He didn't need a bunch of transfer portal dudes. He had everything he needed in the locker room to get where they are now, which is in contention for a Big 12 title. And now that secondary spot also likely to be taken up by another new dude in the conference, whether it be Arizona State or potentially, you could be looking at other obstacles for Colorado, like us. Oklahoma State could be an obstacle for Colorado. Maybe not the way that we're playing currently, but this Big 12 has been more wild than I thought coming into it. And I am disappointed that the old Hateful Eight original guard is not up there at the top, even if it's not us. I would prefer to see Kansas State and Iowa State and the Baylors of the world up there towards the top. BYU gets a little bit of a pass because it's not their first year in the Big 12, but even then, they're new to the Big 12, and it only took them 1 year of adjustment in the conference to turn around and make the most amount of sense and make a lot of us in the original Hateful Eight of the conference look pretty foolish in the process. So hats off to Kalani Sitake. I was wrong about Deion Sanders as well. I didn't think that building your roster every single year off of just the transfer portal and only bringing in 7, 8, 9 high school guys was the right recipe for success. I was wrong. Deion Sanders seems to be smarter than a lot of people in the room. Now, the difficulty for Colorado, I imagine, is going to be holding on to him, because I'm sure there's NFL teams that are chomping at the bit to get Deion Sanders involved, because thus far, everywhere he's been, it's been an uptick pretty quickly in the expectations of that particular place. So perhaps the NFL would be different or would be the same for him. Although I think Colorado gave him an opportunity when nobody else would. So I have a feeling he might ride with Colorado for a little while. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think about the fact that it's the new dudes in the conference that are leading the way. And we're left with pretty much Iowa State as the last bastion of hope for the original Hateful Eight of the conference to have representation in Arlington. And whenever you're talking about representation in Arlington, again, this bipolar Big 12 picture has never really taken full shape. And it still hasn't, because of the most recent loss for BYU. And it does prove that you can be the last place, second last place team in the conference and still have a lot of capabilities. Oklahoma State hasn't shown that recently, but I do feel like we have those same opportunities ahead of us. And having all these seniors out there, it could be a big shock to the system. It could be something that's huge for this particular roster. I don't know yet. Time shall tell. But, I don't know. We have something to look forward to. And maybe there's a little bit of a rivalry brewing between us and Texas Tech. So sending them out on a loss could be kind of fun too. What's a lot of fun is capitalizing on your monetary situation, and the NFL Cowboys are going to give you plenty of opportunities to do that. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet a $5 holler and get $150 back in bonus bets if it's a winner. If you're a first-time customer, bet that $5, get the $150 back. When you get that hunch, the tingling sensation in the middle of the game that something crazy is about to happen, you can now check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more from the same page where you place your bets from. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with that $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet is a winner. That is FanDuel.com. Go there today and never waste that tingling sensation in the middle of the game. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Additionally, we got to talk about some game time ticket action. Whenever you're looking to get out on the road or stay pretty close to home, Game Time Tickets is going to have you covered for whatever event you're needing in your area. And with the Game Time picks, it filters out all the fluffy stuff so you get just the incredible deals on great seats without having to sift through thousands of other tickets and thousands of minutes doing it. We could talk about the ticket getting process being so much more simplistic with Game Time because the all-in pricing shows you the total up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. The seat view is 100% panoramic, and you know exactly what you're getting before you ever step foot inside the stadium. The lowest price guarantee means they will credit you back 110% of the difference, and the Game Time ticket coverage is the best in the business with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So you need to take the guesswork out of buying tickets for Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account and redeem that code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Make sure that you download the Game Time app today because you already know what time it is. It's game time. Now we get to talk a little bit about some of the crazy hot starts that we've been experiencing. The Cowgirls are undefeated. The Cowboys are undefeated on the hardwood. So we're bringing some of the rowdy back to Gallagher-Iba. Jacie Hoyt's Cowgirl squad looks like they're going to have the opportunity to be pretty deadly in this conference. Now, obviously, the men's Big 12 is not the same as the women's Big 12. The men's Big 12 runs everything in college basketball, and with the addition of Arizona, that's likely not going to change anytime soon. And now you're hearing BYU is willing to fork over football money for some of their basketball players, which is equal parts amazing and astonishing at the same time. So there's a lot of teams in this league that are going to take basketball very seriously moving forward. And the serious component for our basketball squad is what gives us an opportunity. They are respecting Gallagher-Iba. They are respecting the tenacity, the hustle, the discipline that it's going to take to play in a Steve Lutz system. And on top of that, we also have had a crazy hot start by David Taylor's wrestling squad. What you can do is do a comparison between last year and this year. And the expectations for this year were to come in and find a way to get a lot of tech falls, a lot of pins, score a lot of points, which has been the Achilles heel of Oklahoma State wrestling for the last 8 or 9 years or so under John Smith. The John Smith philosophy used to be the best in the game. And then Cale Sanderson said, we're actually going to change that. We're not just going to dominate all the time. We're going to focus more on scoring points. So we might be susceptible in certain areas, but we're going to make up for it by being overly aggressive in the point scoring category. So that is what you wanted to see out of Oklahoma State. And against Utah Valley, you expected to see a lot of that. Now, Utah Valley did have a couple big-time ranked wrestlers that we had a difficult time with, including Cam Amin. Now, is that going to shake out for the rest of the season? Potentially not, because then we turn around and absolutely housed Oregon State. So it was supposed to be a tick up in competition from Utah Valley to Oregon State, but we actually manhandled Oregon State better than we did Utah Valley. The expectations for this wrestling club continue to tick up, but for all of us out there that watched wrestling last season, you would see some of our top guys would take a fairly commanding lead and then kind of bleed the clock. So we'd get a lot of wins, but we didn't get a lot of points, right? Whenever you watched Utah Valley, which shout out to them for hosting it live on their YouTube channel, and then I listened to Oregon State, but the differentiation seemed to be that we were far more aggressive in the second match. And the differentiation between a John Smith-led ball club and this wrestling club is that David Taylor is encouraging them to let the dude go. So give up points to be more aggressive and get points. And whenever you do that, right, when you're willingly giving up points, it does kind of change your game plan a little bit because you have to be more aggressive than you thought you were going to. And that was something that David Taylor mentioned in his exit interview after the two tournaments or the two duels, was that it was nice to see some guys that had a commanding lead continue to push the pace and try to turn it into a tech fall or a submission. And that is something that we didn't get a lot of last year. If guys had a 10-4 lead, right, or a 12-4 lead and they could get a major decision, they would just kind of do that. There wasn't a lot of pushing to turn that into a tech fall or a pin. But that is the difference between this season, and it's definitely going to make it very interesting as the season progresses. And seeing Cale Hughes down at 133 was absolutely phenomenal because he wasn't doing the same things against UVU. And then we got to finally see at 141 taking Jamison back in the lineup officially. And from what I could hear, it seemed to be a very good match for him. So basketball's undefeated for both the men's and women's departments. Cross country still competing for a national title. And now we have wrestling doing exactly what we hoped we would see. But we didn't know that we'd see that many points scored this early on from a multitude of wrestlers against good competition. This is going to be a fun season all the way across the board, and we kind of need this injection of orange positivity because football season's been fairly downtrodden. Nonetheless, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State, because you could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. Podcasting people out there, you know what to do. Hit the stars, leave a review. You are the bread, the butter, the bricks, the foundation, fondue, the funny stuff, funky stuff. You're all of it. All righty, y'all. Later, my taters.